Hi, Steve. Were you able to make the call?
Yep.
Excellent. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce you. Hey, everyone. For all of our SMA Audio Show podcast listeners, we thank you for tuning in again this week on the SMA Audio Show. This is a audio podcast available on iTunes and other popular podcast stations where we document and interview people, individuals making a difference who impact St. Michael Academies on a day-to-day basis, in addition to the community and partners that we have in our faith of our Catholic faith and mission to bring great education to the community in the South Bay, San Diego area. This week, we are very, very blessed. We have someone who's been involved in Catholic school education for many, many years, who's doing great things, and we brought him on today to kind of share on a great mission with the organization that he's working with that's really trying to empower and ultimately bring Catholic education to many, many more people to really add value to those families and, to the children and the students who pass through these different campuses available here in San Diego. So we have none other than Mr. Steve Stutz on the call. Steve, thanks for joining us. If you don't mind, thank you. And for those who haven't met you yet, can you kind of introduce yourself, give us a little bit of background of how you found your way into, Catholic education and for many, many years?
Sure. So I've been in Catholic education now. I just finished my 31st year in the Diocese of San Diego. I'm a San Diego native. I am a product of public education all the way up through college. And I started in Catholic education, basically got into Catholic education because I had a friend that was a principal, and I was getting my teaching credential, and I needed to do some observations in a regular classroom. I was working in public schools at that time, but I was in a special ed program, and they didn't count that towards my observations. So I was able to go to a Catholic school and volunteer some time, and from that, I was hired the following year. I started as a computer teacher and IT person for school. Unfortunately, I lost a lot of those skills in the IT because I don't have time to keep up with all that's there. I taught at Blessed Sacrament School in the Center City as well as Holy Spirit School. I was at Holy Spirit when Holy Spirit unfortunately closed. And then I went back to Blessed Sacrament and then was asked to be principal at St. Charles Catholic School in 1997, and I did start there. And I actually also was at St. Charles until 2 years ago. And then during the 2010-11 school year, 2011-12 school year, I was also principal, not at just St. Charles, but at St. Michael's Academy for the 2 years. And it was a wonderful time there at the school, great community. So that's a little bit of background.
Awesome. Well, as for the listeners and the community, definitely have a very seasoned and very deep entrenched and mission-driven, drive for being in Catholic schools for doing it for so long. That kind of jumps me right into one of the questions I wanted to get more detail from you is over your time in being involved in Catholic education. For you, like what's really, I guess, kept you, engaged and interested in this field?
Well, I think it's actually two things. The first is that I believe a Catholic school teaches not just academics. It's teaching the social well-being of the child, the physical, the emotional, the psychological, the spiritual, religion, which leads into that second part. The fact that we're able to practice our faith. This is so important as a product of public education. And actually, I grew up during a time when you could share your faith in school, and that was a great experience for me because I had friends that were obviously from other Christian affiliations, and my best friend in the elementary school was Jewish, and I got to know a lot about his faith, and he got to learn a lot about my faith. Unfortunately, that's not the case in public schools anymore. They don't get to talk about it's frowned upon to even talk about your faith because you don't want to hurt somebody's feelings, which doesn't make sense because we talked freely when I was in school many, many years ago, and nobody's feelings were ever hurt. I mean, it was a great way to learn and understand other faith. So the ability to be able to share your faith with people that understand what you share and practice your faith. Jesus Christ is part of the classroom, and one of the slogans that St. Michael still has that I brought to St. Charles, actually stole it from another Catholic school, is Jesus walks on our campus. And really that's truly the case. We believe that Jesus is there in each and every one of us and does walk on that campus. And unfortunately, in other private schools as well as public schools, they don't have that opportunity to share that. And that's a very important part, especially in today's society where there's so much that's going on.
Oh, definitely. Yes, there's a lot of we hear father and pastors across many Catholic Sunday masses and homilies and throughout the daily masses where one of those common topics or things that the ministry that they're always trying to balance or I won't say combat, but just trying to react to is a lot of the outside secular influences, compared to
right.
what we're trying to teach or what we hear and what is taught and enforced at Catholic schools.
Well, one thing that's really current, our bishop, we had the issue back on the East Coast where we had the far left group that got into it with the far right group. I can't remember what the name of the city was where it happened. And the bishop came out and he made an announcement that he wanted to make sure not only in Catholic schools but in our religious education programs we had some program in place that would address these issues of the racism and so forth and so on. And in reviewing, he put our superintendent, John Galvan, and the director in charge of the religious education, Marioli Galvan, they're not related in any way, but they do have the same last name, at the task of putting something together to teach in both the school and the religious ed. Looking at the school curriculum, the religion curriculum, it was already in there. Everything that he wanted was really built into the curriculum. Oh. It wasn't something that had to be recreated. We're already doing that. Just to make sure that their job now is just to make sure that schools recognize where it is and then they can address it there accordingly. But it's pretty remarkable. We're already way ahead of everybody else because it's just part of what we do.
Wow, no, that's amazing. The thing I also wanted to get into, I know recently you've been involved, and I wanted the listeners to hear more about the organization or the team that you're part of right now, where you're trying to bring a Catholic education, make it more available to the people. I wanted you to, if you can, kind of expand on what the mission is with your team that you're a part of right now, that you're working with.
So the South Bay Schools had created in 2015. We created an alliance of all 6 Catholic elementary schools: St. Rose, St. Pius, Our Lady of Mount Carmel, St. Charles, St. Michael's. And then when Juan Diego Academy opened on the campus of Mater Dei, they were also part of that. It's an alliance of the schools. We work together. We team together. But it goes beyond that. One of the remarkable things is all 11 South Bay parishes participate in FIAT also by supporting FIAT through the Blessing Our Future annual appeal, which is, again, very remarkable. 11 parishes. We have the 5, obviously, that have the schools, 6 that don't have schools that are supporting and raising funds for Catholic education. And in 2015, September of 2015, we kicked off the beginning of an annual appeal, which is known as Blessing Our Future. And in the first year, we raised just under $100,000. And this past year, we raised almost $110,000. So it is growing. We have about 400 donors across the 11 parishes that do participate. We do ask people to consider giving $1 a day to Catholic education, or $365 a year. And remarkably, most of those 400, probably 80% are right around that $365. Actually, probably 50 to 60% actually give the $365. We have donors that give, $300, $360, $400, $500. They're right around there. And we do have people that all they can afford is a couple dollars here and here. It all adds up. We also have some donors that are giving well over $10,000 a year. St. Michael's is really blessed. They have one donor that has given the 2 years now in a row of the equivalent of one full tuition for the year, so over $5,000 he's donated both years and has already given half of that going into this third year of the campaign. Also down the lines of that program, it sounds like it's $100,000, but reality is, because we are able to provide scholarships to students that wouldn't be able to continue, they are already enrolled in our schools but wouldn't be able to continue with the extra assistance, or families that are new to the schools, it actually ends up generating over $300,000 in new revenues to the 6 elementary schools in the South Bay combined, not $300,000 each, but combined, which is obviously money is much needed to keep these schools operating. But the whole goal of the program eventually is that any child in the South Bay that wants a Catholic education will be able to receive a Catholic education no matter what they're able to pay. We have a long ways to go. The reality is we have over 21,000 registered parishioners. If everybody gave the $365 that we're asking for, that would raise over $7 million, which would pretty much cover the budgets of the 6 schools combined. So we could say that Catholic school would be free, but then of course we have a lot more students that would want to be in Catholic schools, but it would obviously definitely reduce the cost of Catholic education to everybody involved, which is very much so important, because we do recognize that the cost of education just keeps going up and up and up. We don't have the sisters working in the schools anymore. And they work basically for slave labor. As a joke, we say that, but they really did give room and board in the convent, and they work in the schools. We have laity now that work in the schools, and they have families, and they have homes, and they have to eat, and they have to feed their families, so forth and so on. So it's a lot more costly to operate a school than it was even when I first started as an administrator about 20 years ago. It's just day and night different. But that's the whole goal, working together. We know that by working together as FIAT, as schools, we can reduce the cost of operating the schools, but also the second part of that is to raise funds to help for scholarship money to help students that can't completely afford, to give them a little bit of help. We were able to give 37% of those that applied for a scholarship this last year something. Now, in some cases, that won't be enough, unfortunately. So there's still work to be done there. We're going to lose, I'm sure, a few of those in that 37%, but then there's 63% that also applied that were qualified for a scholarship that we just don't have enough funds at this point to be able to provide everybody with something. So there's still a lot of work to do, but we are moving in the right direction. The first year we were only able to give about around 25% of the applicants a scholarship. So we are growing, but again, there's still a lot of work to be done there.
Excellent. And the thing that I wanted to touch on is, for those who love, the numbers or those details, and it was, such a great answer, and great mission that FIAT Schools is helping, with the community and, to promote that Catholic education. One of the things I want to make sure that the listeners do get to hear too is, do you have, has there been any stories of some of the families or the children who are in Catholic education or have, promoted maybe into high school or what have you, that by them having this assistance, it really, they've had some stories where it's really impacted, their family or themselves, as they grow up.
We do have testimonials. If you on the FIAT website, www.fiatcatholicschools.com. But taking that even further, we did a lot of research in the formation of FIAT, and we're still in the formation stages of what FIAT's actually going to evolve into. It's going to be more than what it is right now, but as it evolves. But we did a lot of research, and a couple of things I think that are very noteworthy. First of all, in the South Bay, obviously, we serve a large Hispanic population, and in public schools, just around 50% of Hispanic young ladies and young men graduate from high school. In Catholic schools, the average is well over 95%. So there's remarkable difference there. If you look and we're going to be kicking off beginning this weekend at some parishes and over the next 4 to 5 weeks, we'll be kicking off the brochure. There's all this information's in our brochure for this year's campaign, and it was in last year's brochure also. But also, 85% of children that do attend Catholic schools end up going on to college. The next closest group would be, I believe it's other religious Catholic or other religious schools or private schools. They only reach about less than 70%. And public schools, it's around 50% of children go on to college. So there's a remarkable difference there, and obviously it supports the importance of Catholic education. But I think as Catholics, I think one of the things we have to recognize, since Vatican II, those adults that attended a Catholic school, 2 to 3 times of those, I'm going to say that right. If you look at the number of people that attend Mass on Sunday, those that graduated from Catholic schools, 2 to 3 times more of their children of those students go to Mass on Sunday and participate in their parish than those that went to public school. And the other remarkable thing is if students that go to Catholic schools are much more likely to consider a religious vocation, which obviously is very important to keep our church going. Our church is all about people being there on Sunday, so the attendance, that first part that I said, again, 2 to 3 times a greater chance of them attending Mass, but there's also a much greater chance of them considering being priests, a sister, a deacon, or even a vocation with him. Like I have a vocation because I work in a Catholic school, but that is specifically what I'm talking about on those statistics. Has to do with the true religious, your priest, your religious, your brothers and your sisters. So if we want our Catholic church to thrive, we need priests and we need sisters and we need brothers, and that's why Catholic education is so important.
I couldn't have summed it up better myself. And I know you're definitely have always a pretty packed schedule. You're always out and about, pounding the pavement, hammering the phones or doing presentations and just spreading that good news and the word. So we definitely appreciate your efforts a lot.
You're welcome. I enjoy doing it. It's for a great cause.
Excellent. And with that, I know that you got a pretty busy schedule, so we want to be respectful of your time. And we think that those who listen to this week's episode, we can share it, with the power of the internet, and all these great mobile devices and phones. For those who see value in this, definitely take Mr. Steve Stutz's information. We will highlight it and put it in the show notes as well. But if there's any questions or what have you, please see obviously your local parish or the academy or school at your local parish, and definitely inquire, because there's definitely resources and tools available, so that if you feel that Catholic education can make a difference in your family and for your child or your children, we have great people like Mr. Steve Stutz and his organization here in San Diego paving the way and making a great model for those to help others and expand, a Catholic education for this year and for many decades to come. So, Mr. Stutz, thank you so much for your time on this call. I appreciate it.
You're welcome, and thank you for asking me to participate. I really appreciate that, too, so we can get the word out.
Awesome. Well, everybody, we'll go ahead and we'll hear you on next week's SMA audio show. Again, you can always find us at www.smasandiego.org. on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter, and also in iTunes or your very favorite podcast channel or resource. And we'll also be placing the notes for the FIAT School's website and social media channels such as Instagram and everything. That will be placed in the show notes as well. I know Steve mentioned it early in the interview, but we can't hammer it enough, and we thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you, Mark.
All right, take care.
Bye.
The podcast you just heard was recorded with Anchor. If you want to make your own, download the Android or iOS app completely free from anchor.fm/podcast. That's anchor.fm/podcast.